Hi, I'm Steve Kimes. I'm pastor of Anawim Christian Community. Whenever I tell people that little phrase right there, everybody asks, what is Anawim? What in the heck does that mean? And so usually I kind of give a little brief explanation. It's a Hebrew word, it means this. Let me give you a longer explanation. Let me talk to you about just a couple Bible passages that talk about Anawim and give us a basic idea about what Anawim means. The first passage I want to go to is Psalm 37 verse 11. Psalm 37, 11. You can look it up yourself, or we're probably going to have it on a little screen right there. But the Psalm 37:11 says, "The meek shall inherit the land." The meek shall inherit the land. And the term meek there, that's our word Anawim. But let's talk about a little bit more about the context of Psalm 37. It's really talking about people who are land-owning peasants, who are being oppressed by other people who are maybe in politics, or who are maybe in who are wealthy or whatever. It's not that different from, let's say, the Middle Ages, when the majority of people were serfs, otherwise known as slaves. They worked the land and somebody else owned the land. In the ancient Hebrew society, everyone was supposed to own their land, but if you were poor, you had to lease your land out to other people who owned it for a period of up to 7 years. And they basically determined what that land was going to be until they were forced to give it back to you, or until they kept it for themselves. Psalm 37 is basically telling people who are poor, it's telling them, don't rebel, don't pull out the pitchforks and the hand grenades and try to kill all the rich and all that. Instead, it's saying, the Lord is the one who's going to get you your land back. The Lord is the one who's going to provide you with what it is that you need and give you justice. It's your land. You will get it back. And so what they're saying is the meek is that term, Anawim. It's really talking about the poor, or the people who are stomped down on by those who are rich. The meek shall inherit the land. Now, Jesus quotes this passage. He quotes it in Matthew chapter 5, in a passage that we commonly call the Beatitudes. And Jesus changes it just a little bit, or at least it's changed in the Greek. We're not sure exactly where it got changed, but it did get changed a little bit. And so the phrase that we're more familiar with is, the meek shall inherit the earth. And so it's not just limited to the land that a particular people have owned. Instead, Jesus is saying it's the meek, they're going to own everything. And once again, it's based on that term Anawim, which means the poor, or the people who are oppressed. Jesus is saying people who are oppressed are going to, in the end, own everything. And it says there that they shall inherit the earth, meaning it's used there in the passive. Whenever you see a passive, especially in the New Testament, but really anywhere in the Bible, whenever you see a passive being used, where instead of saying John gave the cup to Tim, you say Tim was given the cup. That's the passive, is Tim was given the cup. And we don't talk about John at all. John's not actually mentioned, even though we know in our heads that it was John who did it. Well, it's the same way in the New Testament. Whenever the passive is used, it's talking about God, but not trying to use his name directly. So when it says, the meek shall inherit the earth, it's meaning God is going to give the earth to the oppressed. God is giving the earth to the oppressed. Now, since we know what that means, because it's connected to Psalm 37, the meek shall inherit the earth, then we can look at the other Beatitudes and see, well, maybe they mean something similar. For instance, the first one, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven? The kingdom of heaven is the whole earth after God comes and starts to rule himself. And so the whole earth then is given to these people called the poor in spirit. Who are the poor in spirit? Well, it turns out in Proverbs chapter 11, it uses the phrase poor in spirit. And who are they? They are the Anawim. They are the poor, or the outcast, or the oppressed. And these are the people who God is going to give his kingdom, the empire that's actually going to cover the earth once God is ruling the earth. The next one, the next beatitude is, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Who are the people who mourn? Well, of course, people who mourn are usually people who have lost loved ones. But people don't mourn just because somebody has died. People also mourn because they are suffering. They mourn because they're having a really hard time. They mourn because they're oppressed. They mourn because they are having a really difficult time in life. And once again, it says, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. There's that passive again. Who is going to comfort the mourning? God is going to comfort the mourning. When is God going to comfort the mourning? Probably the same time that he establishes the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is going to come, and God is going to give the poor in spirit. He's going to give them the kingdom of heaven, and then he's going to comfort those who are mourning. Those who are mourning because of oppressor. Why? Because God is going to stop all oppression. God is going to stop all oppression all over the earth. Okay? Then we have the next beatitude is the one that we'd already talked about. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Okay, the one after that, what's that one? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. That term righteousness is a particular term in Greek. It's the same. It has the same effect as in Hebrew, and it can be used one of two ways. It could be used righteousness, as is translated here and translated in most translations. It also can mean justice, because righteousness and justice in the Hebrew and in the Greek really mean the same thing. Righteousness has kind of a religious overtone to it. Justice doesn't. Justice means doing what's right for the community, having what's right for everybody without exception. And if there are people who are hungering and thirsting for justice, what is it that those people, who are these people? They're people who are oppressed. Why? Because there's not anyone in the world who need justice more than people who are oppressed, people who are downtrodden, people who have had their stuff taken away from them. Finally, the final beatitude that we want to deal with here is in verse 11. And it basically says, blessed are you when people reject you. Jesus uses a lot of terms. I'm going to summarize it. Blessed are you when people reject you. The reason he gives is because you are like the prophets of old. And God blessed the prophets of old. God gave them a high standing before him. And so what Jesus is saying is that anyone now who are rejected, people who are downtrodden, people who are outcast, people who are thrust outside of society, those are the people whom God is going to bless. Those are the people who God specifically looks at. And all of this together gives us an idea of what Anawim actually means. First of all, Anawim means people who are rejected, people who are oppressed, and as a result of that oppression, they're poor. The poverty doesn't come first. The poverty actually comes at the end. Secondly, these are people who are confident that they're going to receive justice. They know that they're going to get out of their oppression. They know that they're going to get justice. Finally, these are people who rely on God for their deliverance. They're not just being delivered, they know that God is going to deliver them. Not the government, not anybody else. It's going to be God. And that's why we call ourselves Anawim Christian Community.